welcome to the channel.
I always thought Rachel was my partner for life. You don't marry someone thinking they'll destroy you. But sometimes, life has its own way of showing you just how naive you can be. The night it all fell apart started like any other. I got home from work a little later than usual, traffic was bad, and I'd spent half the day putting out fires at the office. All I wanted was to walk in, kiss my wife, and maybe have a quiet dinner. Instead, I walked into the kind of nightmare you only see in movies. The lights in our bedroom were dimmed, which struck me as odd because Rachel hated dim lighting. She always said it made her feel sleepy. But there it was, her favorite candle burning on the nightstand, the unmistakable scent of vanilla filling the air. I froze for a second before stepping closer. That's when I heard the voices, hers and a man's. Laughing, whispering. My heart felt like it was trying to crawl out of my chest. My first thought was that maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was the TV. But as I stepped closer, the laughter stopped, replaced by a silence so heavy it practically pressed against my ears. I didn't hesitate. I pushed the door open, and there they were, Rachel and some guy I'd never seen before, both scrambling to cover themselves up. For a split second, we all just stared at each other, the room dead silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. What the hell is this? I finally managed to get out, though my voice sounded foreign to me. Rachel stammered, trying to explain, but every word felt like a dagger. She didn't love him. She didn't know what she was thinking. It was a mistake. A lapse in judgment. The same pathetic excuses you always hear. I didn't stick around to listen. I told her to pack her things and get out of my house by the end of the night. She tried to argue, but I wasn't in the mood for a debate. She left, all right, but not before throwing out a dozen half-hearted apologies that only made me angrier. Once she was gone, the house felt empty, like a shell of what it used to be. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the dark, a bottle of whiskey my only company. My thoughts kept circling back to one thing, the man I'd caught her with. I didn't know who he was, but I'd make sure to find out. And that's when the bitterness started to set in, not just at Rachel but at him. The guy who walked into my life and blew it apart without a second thought. That was when the idea of revenge started taking root. I didn't know how or when, but I knew one thing, I wasn't going to let him get away with it. The day after I threw Rachel out, my head was still spinning. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was her with him. I couldn't get the image out of my head. I called in sick to work and spent most of the day pacing the house. I couldn't sit still. But then anger replaced the sadness. I couldn't just wallow. I needed answers. Who was this guy? Did she bring him here often? How long had this been going on? 100 questions, none of them with answers. That's when I remembered the security cameras. I never told Rachel I'd installed them. I worked in IT, and setting up a discreet system was easy. It wasn't even because I didn't trust her, it was more about keeping an eye on deliveries or the neighbor's dog that liked to dig through our trash. But now, those cameras felt like my lifeline. I pulled up the footage from the last week, scrolling through until I saw them together. There he was, dark hair, well-built, like the kind of guy who spends hours at the gym. He drove a black BMW, the kind of car that screamed, "I think I'm better than you." I watched as he pulled up in front of my house, Rachel practically skipping out to meet him. And then I saw something that made my stomach drop. They didn't just come inside. He met her at my doorstep, and she kissed him, right there where anyone could have seen. Not a care in the world. It wasn't just some fling. She was comfortable with him. I scrubbed through more footage, piecing together his visits. He was at my house at least 3 times in the past 2 weeks. Once while I was at work, once on a Saturday when I'd gone to visit my mom, and the third time, the night I caught them. I couldn't sit on this. I needed a name. I remembered Rachel had left her phone charger behind when I kicked her out. I grabbed it and plugged it into my laptop. Her iCloud account was still logged in. Jackpot. Scrolling through her messages, I found his name, Jim. Just Jim. No last name. But there were photos, pictures of him shirtless in what I assumed was his bedroom, a selfie of the two of them at some fancy restaurant, and worst of all, a photo of her kissing his cheek while he grinned like the smug idiot he was. I wanted to punch a hole in the wall. Instead, I opened my browser and searched his number, which Rachel had conveniently saved. Turns out, Jim wasn't just some random guy. He was married. His wife's name was Carly, according to the social media account I found. From the pictures, she looked sweet, too sweet for a guy like him. A petite blonde, always smiling in photos with her friends or their 2 kids. She had that kind of look that said she trusted her husband completely. My anger turned into something sharper, more focused. I didn't just want to confront Jim. I wanted him to feel the same pain I did. And Carly? She didn't deserve to be in the dark about what her husband was doing behind her back. But I couldn't just rush into this. If I was going to go after him, I needed to be smart. I needed a plan. I spent the next few days planning my approach. Confronting Jim directly was tempting, but it was too simple, too easy. He needed to feel what it was like to have his life turned upside down, just like mine had been. And Carly? She deserved to know the truth, but I wasn't going to dump it all on her at once. I had to tread carefully. The first step was finding a way to meet Carly without raising suspicion. I found her Facebook profile, where she posted often about her kids, her yoga classes, and her work as a graphic designer. One post caught my eye. She mentioned volunteering at a local charity event that Saturday. Bingo! When Saturday came around, I made sure I was there. It was a food drive at a community center not far from my house. I signed up as a volunteer and spent most of the morning helping load boxes into cars. Sure enough, Carly was there, wearing a blue t-shirt with the charity's logo and chatting with a few other volunteers. When she walked over to grab a stack of boxes near me, I made my move. "Hey, do you need a hand with that?" I asked, smiling like I hadn't just spent the last week stalking her husband's life. She smiled back, grateful. "Oh, thanks. These are heavier than they look." We made small talk as we worked. She told me how much she loved volunteering, how her kids were getting involved in community events too. I learned more about her in that one conversation than I ever wanted to know. The more she talked, the harder it was to ignore how decent she seemed. By the time the event wrapped up, Carly and I were chatting like old friends. She asked if I planned to volunteer again, and I told her I'd think about it. She laughed and said, "Well, I hope I see you around. It's nice meeting someone who actually enjoys helping out." I watched her walk away, my stomach churning. She was everything Rachel wasn't, kind, genuine, and completely unaware that her life was built on a lie. But this wasn't just about getting revenge anymore. I was starting to feel something I didn't expect: guilt. The more time I spent talking to Carly, the more I realized she didn't deserve to be dragged into this. But then I'd remember the photos of Jim and Rachel together, and the anger came rushing back. I couldn't let myself forget why I was doing this. Jim had ruined my marriage, and I was going to make sure he paid for it. Carly was just the first step. Over the next couple of weeks, I accidentally ran into Carly a few more times. I signed up for another charity event, showed up at the local coffee shop where she liked to work, and even joined a gym I knew she frequented. It was easy enough to strike up conversations. Carly was friendly, the kind of person who'd talk to anyone with a smile on her face. At first, I stuck to surface-level topics: work, hobbies, random small talk. But the more we talked, the more I started to like her. She was sharp, quick to laugh, and genuinely interested in other people. It wasn't hard to see why Jim had married her. One afternoon, we ended up grabbing coffee after a volunteer shift. It wasn't planned, at least not on her end. I casually mentioned needing a caffeine boost, and she invited me to join her. We sat outside, the autumn air crisp and cool. "So what's your story, Kevin?" she asked, stirring sugar into her latte. "My story?" I chuckled, trying to sound casual. "It's not that interesting." "Come on," she pressed. "You show up at these events, always willing to help. You've got to have some reason for getting involved." I hesitated. This was dangerous territory. If I said too much, I risked blowing my cover. But I couldn't lie completely either. People like Carly could smell insincerity a mile away. "Well," I started, "I guess I'm just trying to figure things out. Life's been complicated lately." Her expression softened. "Complicated how?" I looked down at my coffee, pretending to think. "Let's just say I've had to make some big changes recently. I'm trying to focus on what's important, you know." She nodded, her eyes searching mine. "I get that. Life's thrown me some curveballs too." Before I could ask what she meant, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "Everything okay?" I asked. "It's Jim," she said, her voice tight. "He's out of town again. Work, apparently." The way she said it made me pause. There was a hint of doubt, like she didn't fully believe him. I wanted to press her on it, but I held back. She wasn't ready to hear what I knew. Instead, I leaned back and said, "That must be tough, him traveling so much." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "Yeah, it is. Lately, it feels like he's married to his job more than me." I didn't know what to say to that. For a moment, we just sat there, the hum of traffic filling the silence. Finally, Carly shook her head, forcing a smile. "Sorry, I didn't mean to dump that on you. I guess I'm just tired." "Don't apologize," I said quickly. "Sometimes it helps to talk about it." She looked at me, her smile fading into something softer. "Thanks, Kevin. I mean it." As we said goodbye that day, I felt a knot of guilt tighten in my chest. Carly was opening up to me, trusting me, and here I was, using her to get back at her husband. But then I thought of Rachel and Jim together, laughing at my expense. And just like that, the guilt turned back into determination. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. It didn't take long for Carly to start confiding in me more. It wasn't anything big at first, a comment here, a passing remark there. But every time she mentioned Jim, there was this edge to her voice, like she was trying to convince herself things were fine. One evening, after another Jim run-in, we ended up sitting in the parking lot, chatting in her car. It was raining lightly, and the rhythmic tapping on the windshield made the moment feel oddly intimate. She sighed, gripping the steering wheel. "Do you ever feel like you don't really know the person you're supposed to be closest to?" The question caught me off guard. I hesitated before answering, trying to sound neutral. "Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Why do you ask?" Her eyes stayed fixed on the rain-streaked glass. "It's just, Jim's been acting different lately. Distant. He used to tell me everything, about work, his plans, even the little things. But now, half the time I don't even know where he is." My heart pounded. This was it. The opening I'd been waiting for. "Have you talked to him about it?" I asked carefully. She shook her head. "I've tried. He always brushes it off, says I'm overthinking or that he's just busy. But I don't know. Something feels off." I stayed quiet, letting her words hang in the air. Then she turned to me, her eyes searching mine. "Do you think I'm crazy for feeling this way?" "No," I said firmly. "You're not crazy. If you feel like something's wrong, there's probably a reason for it." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. Instead, she nodded slowly. I don't know what to do anymore. I want to trust him, but it's hard when things don't add up." I wanted to tell her everything right then and there, to lay it all out and show her who Jim really was. But I couldn't. Not yet. If I rushed it, she might shut down or worse, defend him. I needed to plant the seed first, let her come to the conclusion on her own. "Sometimes," I said gently, "it helps to look for answers. Even if it's just to put your mind at ease." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Maybe there's a way to find out if your instincts are right," I suggested. Not to accuse him of anything, but just to know. She didn't respond right away, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. Finally, she nodded. "Maybe you're right. I hate feeling like this, like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." As I walked to my car that night, I couldn't shake the mix of emotions swirling in my chest. On one hand, I was thrilled. Carly was starting to doubt Jim, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. But on the other hand, the more time I spent with her, the harder it was to separate my plan from my feelings. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to care about Carly. Yet, as I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way her voice cracked when she talked about Jim, the vulnerability in her eyes when she asked if she was crazy. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was becoming something much more complicated. After that night in Carly's car, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. The way she doubted Jim wasn't just a passing thought. It was something that had been eating at her for a while. I knew I couldn't let her suspicions die down. I needed to keep them alive, carefully nudging her toward the truth without tipping my hand. The next time we met was a few days later at the coffee shop. She was sitting by the window, her laptop open but untouched. Instead, she was staring out at the street, lost in thought. I grabbed a coffee and walked over. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Mind if I join you?" She smiled faintly. "Sure. I could use the company." We talked for a bit, small talk at first, but I could tell her mind was elsewhere. Finally, I decided to push gently. You seem a little distracted, I said. Everything okay? She hesitated, biting her lip. It's Jim again. I hate feeling this way, but I can't shake the feeling that he's hiding something. What makes you think that? I asked, keeping my tone casual. It's little things, she said, sighing. He's always got an excuse for why he's late, why he's traveling, why he can't answer his phone. And then there's the fact that he's been acting different around me, more distant, less, I don't know, connected. I nodded, pretending to think it over. Have you considered looking into it? She raised an eyebrow. Looking into it? Like spying on him? Not spying, I said quickly. Just getting some clarity. Sometimes, when things feel off, it's better to have answers than to keep guessing. She frowned, clearly conflicted. I don't know. That feels wrong. Maybe, I admitted. But wouldn't it be worse to keep living with that doubt? You deserve to know the truth, Carly, whatever it is. Her expression softened, and she looked down at her coffee. You're right. I can't keep ignoring this. But I wouldn't even know where to start. That was my cue. I could help, I offered. Her head snapped up. Help? How? I'm pretty good with tech, I said, keeping my voice light. If you wanted, I could help you track down some answers. Just enough to put your mind at ease. She hesitated, her gaze searching mine. I don't know, Kevin. This feels like such a big step. It's your call, I said, leaning back in my chair. I just hate seeing you like this. You deserve to feel secure in your marriage. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, I thought she might say no. But then she nodded, almost to herself. Okay, she said quietly. Let's do it. We spent the next hour coming up with a plan. I suggested starting small, checking his phone records, monitoring his schedule, and looking for inconsistencies. She agreed, though I could tell she was nervous. As we wrapped up, Carly reached across the table and touched my hand. Thank you, Kevin. I don't know what I'd do without you. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I forced a smile, but inside, I felt a pang of guilt. I was supposed to be using her to get back at Jim, but instead, I was starting to care about her, really care. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Over the next week, Carly and I worked together to dig into Jim's life. She was hesitant at first, but once she started noticing the cracks in his stories, her determination grew. It was subtle things, dates that didn't line up, receipts from places he claimed he'd never been, late-night phone calls he brushed off as work emergencies. I helped her set up a tracker app on his phone. Carly was reluctant but agreed after Jim blew off yet another dinner with her and the kids, citing a last-minute meeting. She stared at his untouched plate of spaghetti and muttered, "It's like he's not even trying anymore." The first ping came 3 days later. Jim had told Carly he was working late at the office, but the tracker showed him parked outside a motel on the edge of town. Carly called me in a panic, her voice shaking. "Kevin, he's not at work. He's somewhere else. A motel." I could hear the heartbreak in her voice, and it took everything in me to stay calm. "Okay," I said. "Take a deep breath. Are you sure it's him?" "Yes," she whispered. "I don't know what to do. Do you want to confront him?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No," she said quickly. "Not yet. I need to be sure." "Then let's get proof," I suggested. "I'll meet you there." When I arrived at the motel, Carly was sitting in her car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her together. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "I feel sick," she said. "You don't have to do this," I told her, though part of me hoped she would. "No," she said firmly. "I need to know." We waited for over an hour before we saw him. Jim came out of one of the rooms, and my stomach clenched when I saw who was with him. Rachel. She was wearing a coat I'd bought her last Christmas, laughing as she leaned into Jim's side. They walked to his car, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet away. Carly gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That's your wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected, my jaw tight. She turned to me, disbelief and betrayal written all over her face. "You knew?" "No," I said quickly. "I didn't. Not for sure. But I had my suspicions." Carly's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might slap me. Instead, she just shook her head. "This is insane. How could they do this to us?" I didn't have an answer. When Jim and Rachel drove off, Carly and I sat in her car, the silence thick between us. She stared out the window, her hands trembling. "Do you think they've been seeing each other this whole time?" she asked finally. "Probably," I admitted. Rachel was good at hiding things. Carly let out a bitter laugh. So was Jim. "God, I feel like such an idiot." "You're not an idiot," I said firmly. "This isn't your fault. They're the ones who made this choice." She turned to me, her eyes filled with anger and hurt. "What do we do now?" The question hung in the air. Part of me wanted to say, "We take them down." But another part of me hesitated. Carly wasn't just collateral damage anymore. She was someone I genuinely cared about, and I didn't want to drag her into something messy. "We take it one step at a time," I said finally. "If you want to confront him, I'll be there. If you want to walk away, I'll support that too." Carly nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. "I'm not walking away. He doesn't get to do this to me and our kids." For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of hope. We weren't just victims anymore. We had the power to fight back. And I wasn't going to let Jim or Rachel get away with it. After the motel incident, Carly and I knew we needed more than just a single sighting to confront Jim and Rachel. We needed undeniable proof, something they couldn't weasel their way out of. Carly suggested hiring a private investigator, but I convinced her we could handle it ourselves. "You don't need to spend money on someone else when we can do the same thing," I told her. She hesitated but finally agreed. "Okay, but this has to be airtight. I'm not letting him gaslight me out of this." Over the next week, we started collecting evidence. Carly took screenshots of text messages from Jim's phone, messages that, while vague, hinted at meetings and plans with someone who wasn't her. I followed Rachel's social media, noticing subtle patterns, vague work trips that lined up perfectly with Jim's. The tracker app on Jim's phone proved invaluable. Twice more, he visited the same motel, each time meeting Rachel. This time, Carly and I parked farther away, taking photos from a distance. It felt surreal, sitting in her car with a camera, watching the man who was supposed to love her laugh and hold hands with my ex-wife. "You know what the worst part is?" Carly said one night as we waited for them to emerge. "What?" "I keep thinking about how much effort I put into making our marriage work. I bent over backward for him, Kevin. And this whole time, he was with her." I didn't know what to say. I'd felt the same way about Rachel once, wondering how all those years together could end so cruelly. "They don't deserve you," I said finally. Carly looked at me, her eyes softening. "Thanks. That actually helps." The breaking point came a few days later when Carly found a charge on Jim's credit card statement, a dinner for two at a high-end restaurant downtown. He'd told her he was working late that night. "That's it," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "I'm done playing nice. He's going to know I'm on to him." "Are you sure?" I asked, surprised by her sudden change in tone. "Yes," she said, pacing her kitchen. "But not yet. I want them both in the same place when this all comes out. No lies, no running." I nodded. "We can make that happen." That's when the plan started to take shape. Carly and I decided to stage a confrontation. We tracked Jim and Rachel's movements carefully over the next week, waiting for the right opportunity. It came when the tracker app showed Jim heading to the motel again on a Friday evening, Rachel's usual yoga night. "I'm going to need backup for this," Carly said as we prepared to head out. "What kind of backup?" I asked, half joking. She grinned, her expression fierce. "My lawyer." Sure enough, Carly called her attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Dana. She agreed to come along, promising to stay in the background and record everything. When Friday night came, we parked near the motel, waiting for Jim and Rachel to show up. Carly's hands were trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she muttered. "You're stronger than you think," I said, trying to reassure her. When Jim's car pulled up and Rachel stepped out, Carly's expression hardened. "Let's do this." We followed them into the motel, keeping a safe distance until they disappeared into a room. Carly knocked on the door, her jaw set and her eyes blazing. It swung open, and Jim's face went pale. "Carly? What are you doing here?" "Catching you in the act," she said, pushing past him into the room. Rachel was sitting on the bed, her face flushing red when she saw me behind Carly. "Kevin? What are you doing here?" "Funny," I said, crossing my arms. "I was about to ask you the same thing." Dana stepped into the room, holding her phone up to record. Smile, folks. This is going to come in handy. The confrontation was chaotic, Jim stumbling over excuses, Rachel trying to play the victim. Carly didn't hold back, laying out every piece of evidence we'd gathered. You lied to me, to our kids, she said, her voice shaking with anger. You humiliated me. And for what? For her. Jim had no answer. As the confrontation came to an end, Carly turned to me. Let's go. I've heard enough. We left them standing there, their lies laid bare. Outside, Carly leaned against her car, tears streaming down her face. You did it, I said softly. She shook her head. We did it. But what now? Now, I said, we rebuild. And we make sure they pay. The confrontation left a storm in its wake. Carly filed for divorce the very next morning, and Dana wasted no time helping her secure a strong case. She had the video evidence, screenshots of Jim's messages, and proof of his spending on Rachel, all of it painting a damning picture of infidelity and deceit. Meanwhile, I took the weekend to process everything. Seeing Rachel again stirred up emotions I thought I'd buried, anger, betrayal, even a flicker of sadness. But those feelings were quickly replaced by a sense of relief. She was no longer my problem. Carly, though, had to deal with the fallout. Jim didn't take her decision quietly. He showed up at their house the day after the confrontation, pounding on the door. Carly called me, her voice shaking. He's here, Kevin. He's yelling at me to let him in. I'm on my way, I said, grabbing my keys. When I arrived, Jim was still outside, shouting accusations about Carly ruining his life. I parked down the street and walked up calmly. Jim, I said, keeping my voice steady. You need to leave. His head snapped toward me, his face contorting with anger. This is none of your business. It became my business the moment you decided to wreck my marriage too, I shot back. He stepped closer, puffing up his chest like he wanted to intimidate me. You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a loser who couldn't keep his wife happy. I felt the anger rise, but I held my ground. And yet here we are, both of us standing outside Carly's house while she's inside filing for divorce. Looks like we're both losers, Jim. His face twisted, and for a moment, I thought he might swing at me. But then Carly opened the door and stepped out, her phone in hand. I've called the police, she said, her voice firm. Leave, or I'll let them handle this. Jim glared at both of us before finally storming off. Thanks for coming, Carly said quietly as I followed her inside. Always, I replied. In the days that followed, Carly began piecing her life back together. She moved quickly to protect herself financially, freezing their joint accounts and changing the locks on the house. Jim's attempts to reconcile grew more desperate. Texts, phone calls, even flowers left on her doorstep. But Carly stood firm. I admired her strength. Watching her take control of the situation was inspiring, but it also deepened the connection I felt toward her. She wasn't just someone I was helping anymore. She was someone I cared about deeply. And then there was Rachel. After the confrontation, she tried to contact me several times. Texts, voicemails, even a message through a mutual friend. I ignored all of it. I didn't need to hear her excuses or apologies. My focus was on moving forward, not reliving the past. One evening, Carly and I met up at her house to go over some of the legal documents Dana had prepared. After we finished, we sat on the couch, sipping wine. You know, Carly said, staring into her glass, I don't think I've properly thanked you. For what? For everything, she said, looking up at me. For being there when I needed someone. For helping me see the truth, even when it hurt. I shrugged, trying to play it off. You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could help. She set her glass down and leaned closer. No, really. I don't think I would have had the strength to face any of this without you. Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I looked at her, seeing the warmth and sincerity in her eyes, and I realized how much she meant to me. Before I could overthink it, I reached out and took her hand. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Carly. But, I'm glad I could be here for you. She smiled softly, her fingers tightening around mine. For the first time in what felt like forever, the weight of betrayal and anger lifted. Maybe, just maybe, we were both finding a way to heal. Things changed after that night on Carly's couch. There was a shift between us, subtle but undeniable. We didn't talk about it right away. Neither of us was ready to put words to whatever was growing. But it was there, unspoken but present, in the way we looked at each other, the way our conversation stretched long into the night. Carly's divorce moved forward quickly, thanks to the mountain of evidence she and Dana had gathered. Jim fought it at first, trying to weasel his way out of the consequences, but he didn't have a leg to stand on. When he realized Carly wasn't backing down, his resistance fizzled out. Rachel, predictably, didn't stick around. She and Jim stopped seeing each other shortly after the confrontation, likely realizing their little affair wasn't going to work in the real world. I heard through the grapevine that she'd left town, but I didn't bother confirming. For the first time in months, it felt like there was some peace on the horizon. One Saturday, Carly invited me over for dinner. It was nothing fancy, spaghetti and meatballs, but it felt significant. Her kids were at a friend's house, and it was just the two of us. She greeted me at the door with a warm smile. "Come in." I just opened a bottle of wine. The evening was relaxed, comfortable. We laughed and talked like we always did, but there was something different in the air, something neither of us could ignore anymore. After dinner, we moved to the couch, our glasses of wine still half full. Carly tucked her legs under her and looked at me, her expression serious. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. "Of course. Why did you do all of this? Helping me with Jim, being there for me. Why?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. At first, it was about revenge. I won't lie about that. I was angry, at Rachel, at Jim. But then, I paused, meeting her gaze. Then it stopped being about them. It became about you. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't look away. "I wanted to help you because you deserve better," I continued. "You deserve someone who cares about you, who sees how incredible you are." She didn't say anything for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kevin, I don't know what I'd do without you." Before I could respond, she kissed me. The kiss was tentative at first, like she wasn't sure if it was okay. But when I didn't pull away, it deepened, years of hurt and betrayal melting away in that single moment. When we finally pulled back, Carly laughed softly, her cheeks flushed. "I've been wanting to do that for a while." "Me too," I admitted, a grin spreading across my face. We spent the rest of the evening curled up on the couch, talking and laughing like nothing else in the world mattered. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt whole. The next morning, as the sun filtered through the windows, Carly made coffee while I sat at the kitchen table, watching her move around the room. "What are you staring at?" she teased, handing me a mug. "You," I said simply. She rolled her eyes but smiled, leaning down to kiss my cheek. "You're ridiculous." Maybe I was. But for the first time in months, I felt like I'd found something good, something worth holding on to. Carly and I weren't just rebuilding our lives, we were building something new together. And for the first time, I felt like I could leave the pain of the past behind. Over the next few weeks, Carly and I found ourselves slipping into a rhythm that felt both natural and new. We didn't rush things, there were still wounds to heal, and neither of us wanted to jump into something without being sure. But the bond between us was undeniable. Her kids, Ethan and Lila, started warming up to me too. I didn't push, I let them come to me in their own time. Ethan, her oldest at 10, was guarded at first, but I won him over with a shared love of baseball. Lila, only 6, was much quicker to trust, often asking me to read her bedtime stories when I was around. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Carly leaned against the counter and smiled at me. "You're really good with them, you know." I shrugged, drying a plate. "They're great kids. They make it easy." Her smile softened. "Still, thank you. For being patient with them. With me." "You don't have to thank me," I said, setting the plate down. "I care about all of you." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But instead, she stepped closer and kissed me, softly, but with a quiet intensity that said more than words ever could. Despite the progress we were making, Jim wasn't completely out of the picture. He had visitation rights with the kids, though Carly kept things strictly professional when dealing with him. I offered to be there whenever she had to see him, but she waved me off. "I can handle him," she said firmly. And she did. The few times Jim tried to worm his way back into her life, Carly shut him down without hesitation. It was a side of her I hadn't seen before, strong, unwavering, and fiercely protective of her boundaries. Still, I knew it wasn't easy for her. One evening, after she dropped the kids off at Jim's for the weekend, She came over to my place, looking exhausted. He tried to guilt me again, she said as she sank onto my couch. About how I'm breaking up the family, how the kids deserve better than this. Unbelievable, I muttered, sitting beside her. He's the one who broke the family. I know, she said, rubbing her temples. But hearing it still gets to me. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. You're doing what's best for you and the kids. Don't let him make you doubt that. She smiled weakly, leaning her head on my shoulder. Thank you, Kevin. I don't know what I'd do without you. The next day, we decided to take the kids out for a day trip to the local zoo. It was the first time we'd done something like that as a group, and I wasn't sure how it would go. But by the time we were watching the giraffes and sharing cotton candy, it felt like we'd been doing this forever. At one point, Lila tugged on my hand and whispered, "Do you love Mommy?" The question caught me off guard. I crouched down so we were eye level. Why do you ask? Because you make her happy, she said simply. I smiled, my heart squeezing. I do love your mommy, Lila. A lot. Good, she said with a nod, skipping off to join Carly and Ethan. That night, as Carly and I tucked the kids into bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Lila's question. It wasn't just a question from a child, it was a reminder of how much Carly and her family had come to mean to me. When we finally had a quiet moment alone, I turned to Carly and said, "I love you." She froze, her eyes widening. I know it might seem fast, I added quickly. But it's true. I've felt it for a while now. Her lips trembled, and for a second, I thought she might not say it back. But then she smiled and whispered, "I love you too." And just like that, everything felt right. For a while, it felt like life was finally settling into something normal. Carly and I were growing closer, the kids were warming up to the idea of me being part of their lives, and even the legal battles with Jim were moving in her favor. But the past has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. It started with a text. "Rachel, can we talk? Just once?" I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. I'd ignored every attempt she'd made to contact me since the night at the motel, but something about this message felt different. It wasn't angry or manipulative, it felt almost desperate. When Carly noticed me staring at my phone, she tilted her head. "Everything okay?" "It's Rachel," I said, my voice flat. Her expression darkened. "What does she want?" "She wants to talk," I said, tossing the phone onto the counter. I don't know if I should even respond. Carly studied me for a moment before speaking. "Do you want to talk to her?" "No," I said quickly. But then I hesitated. Maybe. I don't know. Part of me wants to just ignore her, but another part of me. "You need closure," Carly said softly. I nodded. "Yeah." She reached across the table and took my hand. "If you think it'll help, you should meet with her. But only if you're ready." 2 days later, I agreed to meet Rachel at a coffee shop. The moment I saw her walk in, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, hurt, and a lingering sadness I hadn't expected. She looked thinner, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look almost fragile. "Thanks for coming," she said as she sat down. I didn't respond right away, taking a sip of my coffee instead. "What do you want, Rachel?" She sighed, twisting her hands together. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I needed to apologize. For everything." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a bit late, don't you think?" "I know," she said quickly. I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything happened. And I realized how badly I messed up, not just with you, but with myself." Her words sounded sincere, but I wasn't sure if I could trust them. "Why now?" I asked. "Why not months ago, when this all started?" "Because I was too ashamed," she admitted. "And too selfish. I thought I could just move on, but I can't. I lost you, and I lost myself in the process." I sat back, studying her. "So, what are you hoping to get out of this conversation?" "Forgiveness." Rachel looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe. But mostly, I just want you to know that I regret what I did. I regret hurting you." I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her how deeply she'd hurt me. But another part of me felt nothing. Like the anger and pain I'd carried for so long had finally burned out. "I don't hate you, Rachel," I said finally. "But I can't forgive you either." "Not yet." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I understand. I hope one day you can." When I got back to Carly's house that evening, she was waiting for me in the living room. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice gentle. I sank onto the couch beside her. "It was weird." She apologized, said she regrets everything. "But I don't know if it changes anything." "It doesn't have to," Carly said, resting her hand on mine. "You don't owe her anything, Kevin. Not forgiveness, not closure, nothing." I looked at her, gratitude swelling in my chest. "Thanks, Carly, for understanding." She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Always." For the first time, I felt like I was finally letting go of the past. Rachel's apology didn't fix what she'd done, but it gave me the clarity I needed to move forward, with Carly, with her kids, and with the future we were starting to build together. After meeting Rachel, I felt a weight lift, not completely, but enough to breathe easier. Her apology didn't erase what happened, but it closed a chapter one needed to end. Carly could sense the change when I came back that evening. "You seem lighter," she said, handing me a cup of tea. "Maybe I am," I admitted, sitting beside her on the couch. She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad." The moment felt quiet, easy. No tension, no unspoken words, just us. "I've been thinking," I said after a while. "Oh," she teased. I chuckled. "No, seriously. I want to take the next step with us. Whatever that looks like." Carly sat up, her eyes meeting mine. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," I said. "I love you, Carly. I love your kids. I'm all in." Her smile widened, and she leaned in to kiss me. "Then let's do this. Together." In that moment, the past didn't matter. What mattered was the life we were starting to build, one filled with love, trust, and the promise of something better. Carly and I started making plans, not huge ones, but enough to show we were serious. I spent more time at her house, helping with the kids' routines and finding my place in their lives. One evening, while Carly was tucking Lilo into bed, Ethan pulled me aside. "Are you going to marry my mom?" he asked bluntly. The question caught me off guard. "What makes you ask that?" He shrugged, his expression serious. "You make her happy. Happier than I've seen in a long time." I smiled, touched by his words. "I hope so. But we're taking things slow. It's important to get it right." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Okay. Just don't hurt her, okay?" "You have my word," I said, ruffling his hair. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Jim started making more appearances, pushing back against Carly's decisions. He claimed he wanted more time with the kids, but it was clear he just wanted control. One Saturday, he showed up unannounced during our family movie night. Carly answered the door, her tone sharp. "What do you want, Jim?" "I'm here to see my kids," he said, his eyes darting to me sitting on the couch. "They're asleep," she replied firmly. Jim glared at me. "You think you can just step into my life and replace me?" I stood, keeping my voice calm. "I'm not replacing anyone. I'm here because they want me here." Jim's jaw tightened, but Carly cut him off before he could respond. "You need to leave. This isn't about you, it's about what's best for the kids. And right now they're happy. Don't ruin that." He left, but his presence lingered. Later that night, Carly sat beside me, her hand resting on mine. "I'm sorry about him." "You don't have to apologize," I said. "We'll handle him. Together." She smiled, leaning into me. "Thank you, Kevin. For everything." Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we could face them, as a team. The tension with Jim lingered, but Carly and I focused on what mattered, our future. We talked more about blending our lives, taking small steps toward something bigger. One evening, as the kids played in the yard, Carly and I sat on the porch. She looked over at me, a soft smile on her face. "You make me feel safe," she said. "You make me feel whole," I replied. We sat there, watching the kids laugh, the weight of the past finally starting to lift. For the first time, it felt like we weren't just rebuilding from what had broken. We were creating something new, something ours. And it was enough.
Bye.